Hey, welcome Spiceheads to another Spiceworks Partner webinar. Today we're joined by Arcserve to talk a little bit about how you should prepare your business for Mother Nature's fury. So today, really excited to have Stacy Budd, Principal Pre-Sales Consultant and Green Guy for Arcserve, here joining us today. But before we get into today's content, I did want to give everyone a brief overview of the console. Real quick, I'm Matt Eturi here at Spiceworks. I am your host and moderator for today's event, so really looking forward to hanging out with y'all today. So to the left of the slides window, you'll see a brief speaker bio on Stacy. Below that, you'll see some handouts that Arcserve has provided for you all to download and check out during today's webinar. So please feel free to click and check those out at your leisure. As we move around the slides window there, you'll see the Q&A box. Please feel free to get your questions in at any time during today's presentation, and then Stacy and I will be following up to answer those questions in the presentation a little bit later. And then over to the right, you'll see the group chat. If you don't see that, please feel free to use one of the buttons at the bottom of your screen to pop that open. I do want to remind everyone that the group chat is an extension of the Spiceworks community, so please plan to keep the pro and IT professional and hang out and chat with everybody in there. But if you do feel like chat is not for you, please feel free to close that out and just focus in on today's content. I did also want to remind everyone that we will be giving away a ViewSonic 24-inch 1080p monitor to one lucky attendee towards the end of today's presentation. So keep an eye out for that name in chat, and we'll also be following up in the contest group in the community. All right, well, that's enough of me talking. So I think I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Stacy. Stacy, welcome today, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for everybody else for spending a part of your day to listen to me prattle on about disaster preparedness, right, and about Arcserve and what Arcserve can do to help you with that. It's one of my favorite topics because I think it affects everybody out there, from small companies to large companies out there. They all have just as much risk if they're not taking these steps to prepare for disasters. Right? So as we kind of go forward, and when we look at, some of the things that have happened, right? We look at the state of Puerto Rico, right? And, $139 billion to fully recover from Hurricane Maria, according to NPR, right? So we're going to start with a little gloom and doom, okay, when it comes to this. When we look at, what happened this past year with wildfires out in the West, in California and such, right, and the state and the impact that they're having, right, as far as that goes. Some of the largest, if not the most costliest disaster that we've had when we look at that, right, and then it just continues, right. Hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, storms, winter weather. I looked at the news right before here today. I went out to weather.com, no big secret. What did I see? Cyclone bombs, severe flooding, severe storms, potential spawning tornadoes. Mother Nature's been a busy woman, right? And continues, right? Headlines like these becoming the norm, unfortunately, right? Campfire World's costliest natural disaster in 2018, right? We mentioned that. The fire in LA and Ventura counties, the Puerto Rico hurricane that hit that, Hurricane Maria, blizzards, costing upwards of $3 billion. So when we put all this together, for 2018, we're looking at up to $155 billion. According to the Washington Post, cost as far as that goes. So it's definitely something that everybody should have on the top of their list and be kind of, hopefully preparing for as far as that goes. When we look at, the cost of downtime, what happens to your company if your area is hit by a storm? Hurricanes can cause severe wind and water damage. Power can be down for days and possibly weeks, if not longer. I live in Florida, right, when Irma hit us, and I've lived in Florida for all my life, right, so I've seen a lot of other hurricanes besides Irma. But, we were out for about 3 days here at my house, and some businesses were out for much longer. You look at the one that hit up in Panama, right, in that area. Definitely a larger impact up there as well. In the case of one of my healthcare customers, outside of the Houston area, they were without sustainable power and water for weeks, right, as an impact of Hurricane Harvey, right, and even had to evacuate patients to other facilities in Texas. My wife works in the hospital industry, and when Irma came, they actually closed one of the hospitals and transported all the patients to, a different hospital or to several different hospitals, right? So that definitely had an impact for them as well. If your systems are unavailable for extended periods of time, what's the cost and what's it cost you in lost business, right? Whom will your customers turn while your systems are unavailable? I like to think of a lot of times if there's like an online business, right? What if that is not available and, people are going to go to some other type of solution, right? Or somebody else that offers the same kind of services, right? Will your company recover, right? Companies don't always recover. If their data is lost, sometimes, it could be the end of a company, quite frankly. The cost of downtime is growing, right? And customers are growing more and more impatient for services to be available, right? Your customers are becoming more and more impatient. I think that's what we live in today is a now mentality. Everybody wants everything now. So, if you don't have those services available, they're going to turn to somebody else, right? It makes sense that downtime costs are and will continue to rise, right? Companies are ever more reliant on their interconnected networks and applications to conduct businesses or business. In interconnected environments, there's a greater risk of collateral damage. Not only is how's it going to impact, from a data perspective, but also a reputation perspective and all that as well, right? What's the risk of the collateral damage, right? Servers, applications, connectivity, not getting knowledgeable workers back on site, things like that, all can impact, right? And outages when the systems are interconnected. High downtime costs due to inability to meet targets, SLAs, RPOs, RTOs. In my business, we're always talking about RPOs and RTOs, right? Recovery point objective, when you're going to be recovering from, recovery time objective, how long is it going to take to do those recoveries and perform those recoveries. Right, in many cases, employees will look to you, right, for preservation of health, safety, sustained economic support, and necessary accommodations. Okay? Your customers will expect continued delivery of service and or products with only minimal disruptions. Right? It's a fact. People don't want to be inconvenienced, right? Vendors will seek to alter supplies up or down or products critical to you on ongoing operations. Right? So you got to be aware of that. Now, I said we're going to start with gloom and doom, right? I think we've done to the gloom and doom, right? A pretty dreary start to a webcast, if I must say. We're not here to focus on gloom and doom. Instead, we're here to see what methods companies can take to make sure they are prepared in event of a disaster. Okay, so what Arcserve can do for you to help with that. Unfortunately, all too often, I'm speaking to companies after the disaster, right? And they're like, how can we prevent this in the future, right? I can think of, several things. When Hurricane Sandy hit New Jersey, in that area, we got a lot of calls afterwards looking for solutions, right? And this was, of course, a number of years ago as far as that goes. But still, it's true for every disaster. Once a disaster hits, companies and people become aware that, hey, maybe we should have something for this. I'd like to change that mindset, right? I would like to put out there a mindset of, hey, let's prepare ahead of time so that we can go through and see how this is, be prepared so it doesn't affect us as much, right? You need to build a plan, right? Build, document, share, and you need to test that plan, right? Plan is only as good as it's tested, right? Testing, the only valid disaster recovery plan is one that you can prove, will work when needed, right? So testing is very important. Disaster recovery without some methods of testing are based on the hope and faith principles, right? Hope and faith. I hope it works. I know it's going to work. I haven't tested it in a year, but I know it's going to work, right? Where you pray that, and also what the vendor said is going to happen, right? There's a lot of variables. Sometimes, the product in place may work, but if it's not tested, then maybe there's unique things within your environment that needed to be addressed, okay? And maybe in some cases the vendor doesn't come through on their promises either, right? So you need to make sure that you're aware of that through proper testing. You also need to make sure that you have executive buy-in, right? If you don't have executive buy-in, then, it's going to be very difficult, to have any type of disaster recovery plan in place. So you need to make sure that the executives understand the importance of this and what the risk is, right? Our suggestion is don't build your disaster recovery plan in a vacuum, okay? You need to have complete awareness and expectations from every level of your organization. For some of our smaller single-site customers, right, typically, and I said this affects everybody, right, from small companies to enterprise-class companies, and obviously mid-sized companies in there as well, right, it affects every customer out there, right? It doesn't matter if it's a shop that only has one location, but if they lose all their data and all their customer data, they could definitely be out of business, right? So when we look at things like some of our smaller site customers, everything they need to be operational, again, from systems and data perspectives, it's usually hosted on one or two systems, right? So for most of the core systems to be brought back online, it's more of a matter of where, right? What location? Is it going to be a colo? Is it going to be the cloud? When are they going to bring that back on? More than what? Right, what they're going to bring back on, but where and when and how long it's going to take to do that, right? For larger customers, right, or mid-sized customers, it becomes more of a question and concern of what systems, what information, what applications. The what question can be answered on the fly typically, referring back to the cost of downtime. What IT infrastructure do we need to have operational to minimize our impact on business operations? And I like to say all data and all applications are not created equal, right? We don't need to have high availability on every single system out there, right? But there are certain systems that are going to be required to keep the business going, right? And that's how we can distinguish between high availability, disaster recovery, and recovery or backup. Okay. When it comes to backup and data protection, overall, we always advise our customers, follow the 3-2-1 rule, right? Meaning have at least 3 total copies of your data, 2 of which are local, but 1 on different mediums, and at least 1 copy off-site, right? And if you have that offline as well, okay? Definitely gives you the advantages to that. I think it's a steadfast rule. I see it all the time mentioned on Spiceworks on the forums here. So, definitely, keep preaching at it. It's definitely important that people follow that 3-2-1 rule. When we look at high availability, right, what's high availability bring to the table? It brings continuous protection of data and applications and systems, right? Fail over critical systems to remote co-locations or cloud, right? I do have some customers who do local high availability, right? I don't really call that high availability, or I guess it's still high availability, but it's not disaster recovery, right? So you really need to take a look at that. And I do have some customers that, Their solutions are sometimes they have a colo and it's 2 miles away or 3 miles away, right? So, is that really affecting it as well? You really need to consider where that's going to be, right? You need to be able to fail over critical systems to remote co-locations or cloud destinations. Simple enough, right? Remote locations, best practices, should be at least 100 miles away from the production location, right? Go to something like public cloud, right, or private cloud, right? Could be there as well. Public clouds, of course, AWS is those are probably the two most common when we're talking about that. Disaster recovery and business continuity. What are we talking about when we're talking about business continuity? Excuse me. How long can you afford to be down? Which systems are mission critical? What departments? What are we affecting? Facilities, IT, customer service, sales, finance, HR. We need to make sure we're having those discussions with the business owners in each of those different departments, right? Maybe it's a small company and all that is one, right? But if it's a larger company, if you have a larger company, you need to make sure that you're speaking to, I would say, the business owners of each one of those. What verticals really are urgent, right, and have urgent end-user needs? Healthcare, definitely, right? We think about that. People need to get their medical information and all of that as well. In some cases, they need to know. In the case of like the hospital that was evacuated, they need to follow up. Where was this customer evacuated to, right? And that kind of information. Government and emergency services, right? We have plenty of, police departments, things like that are, customers of ours, and they need to make sure if their systems go down, that they have them come up in another area so they can continue to field things like 911 calls and stuff like that as well, right? Uptime requirements, by industry, are, going to be stated typically for those kind of verticals, for government, healthcare. A lot of times they're going to have very strict compliancy and requirements for that. So know what those are, right? And then, compliance, right? When we're talking about to those compliance, are things being hit like, or met, like HIPAA, PCI, SOX, those kind of things, right? There's a lot more. There's FINRA, there's FERPA. There's a whole ton of different compliances out there. You need to make sure that you're meeting those regulations and those compliances. So if you're not familiar with Arcserve, right, and you haven't heard of us before, it's kind of, I'm amazed, right? We've been around for a long time, okay, quite a while. Actually, we were founded in 1983, delivered our first backup and data protection solution in 1988, okay? We're the world's most experienced data protection solution provider, hands down. I don't think anybody else can make the same claim, okay? All this time helping businesses protect their priceless digital assets, okay? Our primary focus always was and continues to be to deliver complete business continuity to mid-size and enterprise businesses across the globe. We have customers all over the world, right? And partners all over the world as far as that goes as well. Sorry about that. I was having a user issue clicking the next button there, right? When we look at, at Arcserve and continue to look at that, customers, we have customers in, I mentioned this all over the world, it's 150 plus countries, right? So, and everything from nonprofit services down to government to healthcare to finance, you name it, right? We're delivered through 7,500 different partners across the globe, right? And we have alliances, that you'd expect to have: Microsoft, HP, VMware, NetApp, AWS, you name it, they're all going to be there, okay? So we definitely have those alliances and those partnerships from that perspective. Yeah. So we're going to start, to this point, we've been talking mainly about how to approach planning for disaster recovery and business continuity from a personal, professional standpoint, from categorizing and gathering critical information and systems, right, to make sure all your eggs aren't in one basket, right, using a 3-2-1 strategy, right? At this point, I'd like to introduce, unified data protection. We're going to speak to unified data protection, and we're going to, go through not only unified data protection, but several of our products that will help with that, but we're going to start off with unified data protection. Right? How do companies properly prepare, right, when we look at this, right? Know your systems. Know your key systems and have redundancy built into power in case of power loss. Have tools in place for to better facilities. With Arcserve solutions, you can and should back up your data frequently, right? So being able to back up the days of backing up daily, although some data is still applicable for, but I try to get my customers to back up if they're backing up daily. Let's back up twice a day, every 12 hours, right? Let's back up every 6 hours. Let's start narrowing that down so that your recovery point objective, the time you're recovering from, it can be a much narrower window, right? And you can have much less data loss in those cases, right? Arcserve solutions also offer the capability to perform disaster recovery in these offsite locations, including cloud, right? So you can not only back up frequently, but then we can spin up these in locations, including cloud locations, like colo locations, public cloud, private cloud, Arcserve cloud. All of those are going to be options for you. Sometimes recovering from backup is just not enough. We do offer the high availability solution, right, for systems and applications from offsite locations, including cloud as well, right? So know when that data how frequently it needs to be protected, what is the right solution that's going to fit into that, right? When we look at unified data protection, right, very straightforward, fast, simple, efficient, next generation data protection. Okay? When we're looking at, protecting, systems with unified data protection, it's an image-based backup solution. That's how we're going to be quick. That's how we're going to be efficient. We're going to protect physical environments, virtual environments, Windows, Linux, all different kind of data from that perspective. We also go in and take it a step further. We support non-x86 systems as well, right? So we can definitely have a solution that can come down and meet most of most industries, systems that are out there. Okay? And we're going to do all from one console. So you don't have to learn multiple consoles, multiple interfaces because you have different systems. In most cases, it's going to be the same interface, the same console. Okay? We can dedupe that data so you're not using so much storage. And that's important, right? When you're taking and you're deduping and you send that data across the wire, you want to reduce the amount of data you send across the wire to things like co-locations or cloud locations. And we can definitely do that we perform our deduplication at the source first, right? So global deduplication, that starts source side. Okay. Of course, we can encrypt that data, right, in motion and at rest. Okay. And not only do we dedupe, but we also compress that data as well. And then we have WAN optimization and multi-threading built into the product too to efficiently send that data across the wire. That data can be spun up locally or at a remote location, including cloud, for disaster recovery purposes. So to quickly spin up those systems and get them up and running. Now there's multiple ways we do that. Instant VM, which is emulation versus virtual standby, which we actually create VMs and have those ready to go. You get different performance levels depending on what your needs are, what your budget allows, if you will. Okay, as far as that goes, we can even protect full systems with high availability, right, and give you continuous data protection. And I don't really consider it disaster recovery or definitely not high availability. I guess it still could be considered disaster recovery, but we support tape as well. I think of tape more as an archiving kind of solution, but if you do have the time to take and get that tape back from a remote location and perform that restore, maybe it's the best solution for certain types of your data that you don't need to get back online right away, right? I mentioned, we're going to support most, operating systems out there from a Windows perspective, from a Linux perspective. Hypervisors, we're going to support VMware, Hyper-V, but we also support things like Citrix, agent-based and Red Hat and KVM, out there as well, right? So we do support, most of the environments that I run into. I think it's pretty rare I run into an environment that I do not support, right? We have things like centralized reporting, alerting, automated DR testing. All of that's going to be in there as well. When we look at the way our product scales, right, from large and distributed environments down to small environments. And I would say really there's a third option that we could have up here that's even on this slide, which is even, a cloud, destination, right, as far as that goes too. So when we're kind of looking at, this environment, if you notice there is what we call recovery point server. It could be our software, it could be our hardware, be a solution like that, right? It could be one of our appliances, kind of what's best for you. Do you have your own hardware and you want to leverage that? Or do you want to have everything from one vendor and leverage our hardware? Okay. And whether or not you have a mix of environments, right? Physical, virtual, Windows, Linux, workstations you want to protect, all of those that we can do, right? Remote locations, definitely to put another recovery point server in that location and replicate the data between the sites. Maybe those two sites are cross-country. Maybe that's your DR plane. You fell over to the other site, which is cross-country or in another state or something like that as well. Okay? When we look at, the way that we protect your data, we're not the only ones that do infinite incremental backups. We do it a little bit different. We do a merge up kind of approach to this, where you definitely, and I still have to coach customers that, full backups are not really required when you're doing image-based backups that support infinite incrementals, right? From any of our backups, we could do a full restore, and you never know that it was an incremental backup. So from infinite incremental number 3 here in the middle, if I went into that and tried to do a full restore, I could definitely perform it just like if I was coming from the full backup that we started from. Right? There would be no difference as far as you're concerned. Where the difference comes in is time, right? Because now I'm grabbing the block level incremental changes, and it's much quicker. I see backups in some cases take seconds to occur. Okay? Depends on the change rate and all that as well. Usually it's in the minutes kind of range in most servers and most organizations, right, for most data that's out there. Okay? A lot of times your critical data is not always a high change rate, right? Sometimes it will. If it's a database or something like that, it may be a high change rate, right? But it's all kind of dependent on the industry that you're in and the type of data that you're dealing with. Now, I mentioned we do a merge up. So right here we have 5 recovery points. We have our full backup, 4 incrementals sitting on top of that. Any one of these I could do a restore from, a full restore or granular restore. And if I performed another one and I wanted to keep 5, once that backup was done, that incremental, we would merge that full into what you see incremental number 1. And then we would have, once again, 4 incrementals sitting on top of that full. So no synthetic backup is required to do. What do synthetics do? They require time, okay? A lot of times they require space and all of that as well. So we do not have that additional overhead, and it does add overhead to do a synthetic, right? So we do not have that approach. When we look at our global deduplication, I mentioned this before, we start at the source, right? We're comparing at the source, and before we send any data to the destination across the wire, LAN or WAN, we're sending the hash file from that local deduplication to the backup server saying, hey, here's what we think is unique. Here's what we have unique on this system. Do we have any of this data also on the server already. And then the backup server is going to respond back to the client server and say, out of that data you thought was unique, only send this data across the wire. Okay? And that gives us lower bandwidth requirements, lower storage requirements, okay? And, and I continue to hear, storage has come down quite a bit in cost. It's not that expensive as it used to be, and a lot of times people are like, oh, we can just buy more storage. But in most cases, when I'm talking to customers, storage is still a concern for them, right? The other thing that I run into is customers are like, well, we have this. We're also looking at purchasing, right, some storage that does deduplication or handles replication. And our answer is usually go with dumb storage, go with a NAS device or something like that. Let us handle the deduplication and replication because we can do it intelligently. We do it from the source, and we're also doing it globally, right, which a lot of times will be an overall better experience for them. And so there's no need to add on that expensive storage, to handle deduplication with our product, right? And that deduplication can go across your site. So if you're replicating from one site to the other, that same global deduplication is taking effect there as well. I mentioned agentless backup, right, for VMware and Hyper-V. As long as you have the storage APIs from VMware, we can leverage those storage APIs to be able to do and perform an agentless backup, right? Hyper-V, we're going to install an agent on the host itself, on the Hyper-V server, and then all the VMs on there can be backed up agentlessly, right? It's a single pass backup of all the VMs without need to install agents or VIX, right? It's only going to back up the change blocks, right? Supports VMware 6.5 virtual volumes, clustered shared volumes on Hyper-V, so what you'd expect to see from that perspective. We're going to grab application consistent snapshots for Exchange, SQL, Active Directory, right? We can go out and purge those logs as we're doing that as well. And restoring is easy. Go right through it, right-click away, and restore a VM, restore a file and folder out of there, whatever you need to do. Right, so it's very quick, easy to do. Right, and it doesn't matter. Maybe that VM is running Linux on it. Okay, we can perform file-level restore for Linux. We could perform, volume-level restore or machine-level restore for those as well. Local and remote virtual standby. Virtual standby is this process where we take the backup and we convert that backup into an actual virtual machine ready to spin up, ready to turn on, right? The advantage to this is you're going to get the best kind of performance because the virtual machine is actually created on the hardware where and the host is pointing right directly to it. You're going to get your best performance. Okay? What's the downside? Well, the downside is you need a third copy of your data, so you need more storage, right? But when we're talking about disaster recovery, it really kind of depends on the role of that server. Okay, we can run that recovery point, right, that virtual standby system, and a lot of times I'll have customers that have a local virtual standby, and then they have another one at another location. So if, just the systems were to go down, right, but my local environment's still up, but my hypervisor's down or something like that, we'll spin up the systems, the backups from them locally, okay? Get them up and running, people connecting to them, and then we can go ahead and address the systems and then get everything sent back over, right, to those systems and recovered. Alternatively, if the location, I don't like to think of total gloom and doom. Let's say the building hasn't blown up, right? We don't like to think of that. But power outages are, all too often a common cause, right? So, power's out, the building's going to be down for a week. Let's bring it up remote, right? If you don't have a DR location, offsite location, bring it up in the cloud, as long as you plan for that, right? So when we do that, when we bring up those systems, we're going to be watching for heartbeats to come online, to register with the hypervisor and so on for that. Right? Instant VM is where we're going to take and we're going to emulate that backup as a virtual machine. So we're going to use emulation to do this, right? I don't need to have that impact of storage. I'm going to lose performance because I'm emulating. Whenever you emulate, you're going to lose some performance, right? But it's going to give you that other level. Now this, because I don't have storage, I go to any of my backups, as long as I've backed up the system, and said go ahead and spin this up, right? Again, this could be local or remote, but it's going to give you a little bit more flexibility, but you're going to do this at the sacrificing, actual performance, right? So whichever makes most sense for those cases that you're dealing with. Also, if you need to protect an entire full system continuously, we could do that as well within UDP, right? So we have, our high availability solution plugged in as well for full system protection, continuous streams of data changes that we're capturing, and then we can take and we can fail over and spin up that, right? So we look at virtual standby, we look at instant VM, we think of that as disaster recovery. I'm recovering from a disaster and I can do that in quick time. Usually those systems are up in 5 minutes. How frequently are you backing up your data? Every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, once an hour, twice a day, whatever it might be, right? Whereas high availability, we're going to be grabbing those data changes as they occur, right? So it's going to be continuous protection. And then the failover, again, is going to be a matter of minutes, all right? And that data is going to be as up to date as it can be. And again, protect your common applications and all of that in there as well, right? Your apps, your data, all of that too. Windows, Linux, we'll be able to protect them. Lastly, I don't believe, and when I say lastly, not for presentation, but for UDP, for UDP and for any solution out there that you have, I mentioned testing. No solution is any good if you're not testing, okay? So we have the ability to do automated DR testing, where we'll take those systems, we'll spin them up, make sure they come online, make sure that heartbeat is registered with the hypervisor, allow you to run custom scripts against it, and do that on a schedule. If you want to do it weekly, you could do that. If you want to do it daily, you could do that, right? I think most companies weekly probably would be pretty aggressive, pretty straightforward. I don't pretend to say that this removes the need to do proper disaster recovery planning and testing. I should say testing. You should still do that because but the need to test the data side of it and the application side of it can be reduced, right? You always also want to test the people side of it, right, and your documentation and those kind of things as well. So you should still have some testing as far as that goes, but it does take some of the stress of, is this going to fail over if I need to from an application standpoint, from a backup standpoint? If I need to bring this online, will it come online? Okay. Definitely, something that I recommend for all of our customers to go ahead and leverage. When we look at, our replication and high availability solution, a little bit different play. Again, this is the continuous protection of data, right? Also has an assured recovery type approach to it as well, right? And it is out there for systems, Windows systems, Linux systems, Unix systems, right? It's a, WAN optimized replication, offline synchronization for remote sites, has all this capability and it supports physical to physical, physical to virtual, virtual to physical, cross hypervisors, it really doesn't matter, right? We could go up to EC2 with this, we could go up to Azure, again, it's kind of all transparent to us. We're hardware agnostic too. You may have a Dell stand on one side that your VMs are sitting on or your data's sitting on, and on the other side you have, a different vendor, totally different vendor. It doesn't matter to us with this, right? Also, distances are not a concern with this solution either. So it could go across the country, okay? So it really doesn't matter. We have customers who go across the globe with this solution as well. continuous data protection, the ability to go in and, continuously replicate. And we do have the ability to do this and protect the data, on a periodic or, on a schedule. But usually now in those cases, I'm telling people for those type of things, let's go ahead and use UDP and leverage that product, right? Unless it's Unix, right? Then this is probably still the solution I'm thinking of. But when you need that continuous data protection, grab the changes as they're occurring. This is really the solution for that. And like UDP, we have that same assured recovery capability built in. Right, assured recovery is going to be able to go in, mount the systems, the standby systems that you've created, and make sure that they come online, run custom scripts against them, so that you can have the confidence that when you do fail over, everything is going to work. Cloud integration, right? Amazon cloud integration, being able to send full systems up to the cloud. We support Amazon EC2 with this, and I believe version 18 or release 18 also supports Azure, and that is RTM. It's already ready to be released. Okay? So maybe you don't have the infrastructure at a remote location, but you do. You can send the data up to something like Amazon or Azure to give you the capabilities, and leverage public cloud for that too. WAN optimized replication, definitely taking advantage of, sending block level, bit level changes of what we're capturing, multi-streaming, and being able to, send that on a schedule, limit the amount of bandwidth that we're doing. If you were to stop replication and resume replication, we're going to resume where we left off. All the things that you expect to see, multi-streaming capabilities within the product there too. Encryption, all of our products support encryption, right? And different levels of encryption. All of our products support, encryption in motion and at rest. Now for high availability, it's going to be in motion, right? Because we're just replicating that data over. It's live data. It's not going to be encrypted, right? Unless you were going to like an encrypted drive or something like that in those cases. So with high availability, it's going to be in motion, right? And that's scalable from AES, 128 up to AES 256, right? And you configure what that would be. Also, you could do this over a tunnel, right? So you could do it over SSL, and that could add another level there as well. Now we're going to kind of wrap it up with our Cloud Direct solution, right, which is a direct to cloud, just as the name implies, no on-site, hardware required for this product. Takes the data up directly to the Arcserve cloud. The UDP solution could send that data that's backed up locally to the Arcserve cloud as well as AWS and Azure, and the UDP solution would give you the ability to go in and perform first local restores and do all that then, or disaster recovery, and then if that's not an option for you, then pull the data back from the cloud or fell over the cloud or whatever the case may be. With Cloud Direct, there is not going to be that local environment, right? That local copy of the data. You can keep the latest copy of the data there if you need to, all right, on-prem, but really it's meant to be data in the cloud. We have two kind of sides to this. We have backup as a service, which is daily backups, right? And your data is in the cloud. And we have disaster recovery in the service, which is going to be the entire systems sent up to the cloud. And you can do that on a much more aggressive schedule, every day, every 6 hours, every 3 hours, every hour, every 15 minutes if you need to. Again, it's going to depend on the data change, network information, configuration, things like that as well. What's your bandwidth out? What's your data change? All of that's going to depend on how frequently you can back up. The recovery time, right, for all of our solutions should be, in most cases, under 5 minutes. right? So be able to fail those over and then be able to access them, right? With both cloud hybrid with UDP and cloud direct, right? We're going to work with you on setting up your VPN so you can connect into that data before the disasters ever occur. So that can be part of your disaster recovery planning. It can be documented, and all you need to do is enable that VPN, either site-to-site VPN or, which is more common, the point-to-site VPN, where your endpoints would connect into it. When we look at key features of Cloud Direct, right? I already mentioned the direct-to-cloud, right? No on-site hardware required for that. Built-in WAN optimization, right? Then we look at security and integrity, okay? The data is going to be encrypted in motion and at rest, right? And it's going to have multiple automated backup validations, right? So we're going to be able to definitely automate that process for you. Okay? Web-based management, Cloud Direct, there's a portal, cloud portal that you log into. You could log into it from anywhere, okay? And, you know, you could be sitting at Starbucks. You could be evacuated to another town. You could log in, you know, or to another state. You could say, okay, let me log in and let me go ahead and spin up, you know, my systems up in the cloud. During Irma, right, we had a customer that was down in South Florida, and they were spinning up all their systems in the cloud, right? And they were on site trying to do this. Well, with a solution like this, they could have been off site doing it, right? So they could still been running their backups up till, right, the point when they needed to fail over, you know, within reason, right? Depending on data change and all that as well. We're going to give them multiple recovery options, right? Be able to restore files, folders, pull down images of systems. All of that's going to be available as well, right? If you do fail over, then you can fail back. You can replicate those changes back down to the system if the system's still there. If not, you can pull down the image and you can re-image that system. And again, you know, just hitting on, you know, the automated backups, files and folders, entire systems, databases, you know, Exchange, entire server images, whatever you need to do from that perspective. When we look at the architecture for backup as a service, and really for, you know, the architecture in most cases, you know, for even disaster recovery as a service is going to be very similar to this, right? We have an agent that installs on the local system, right? Could be on laptops, could be on workstations, right? Servers. The solution can be configured to back up individual files, directories, you know, entire systems. Just depends what the need is, right? It's going to be transferred directly over the internet to Arcserve. And the Arcserve cloud is managed and operated by Arcserve. It's going to meet almost all your compliances and regulatory, you know, things like HIPAA, FINRA, FERPA, SOX, PCI, those kind of things, right? The UDP cloud direct, right, backup as a service can be configured to also save a local copy of backup to any on-premise data storage, NAS, SAN, USB, hard disk, kind of went through that, right? So you could also keep it there too. And it's going to be housed in our SOC 1 Type 2. And I think we're also SOC 2 out in data centers now as well, right? And it's going to be managed through a single web-based console. What's the difference with disaster recovery? In our cloud, we're going to have a hypervisor where you can spin up those systems. That's really going to be the one thing that you would add to that and be able to do that. And our data centers are going to be in New Jersey or California, so depending where your location is, right? For disaster recovery as a service, push button fail over, right? Bring up those systems in less than 5 minutes in most cases. Automated DR testing, you know, where we're going to bring it online, show you that, hey, we were able to bring the system online, and then the ability for you to go in and test that whenever you want to as well, okay? And no charge for that, right? We don't charge you for testing, right? You pay us for the compute you need. You have that compute. Use it as frequently as you want to, okay? And I'm not going to read all these bullet points for you, but the most important one is that VPN connectivity, right, that we're going to work with you ahead of time. And when we look at, the platform support and who we support, and what we support, bare metal systems, virtual systems, Windows, Linux, Mac, we're going to support all of those, right? So, and, all the most common ones out there. So, I don't see too many environments that this cannot fit into from that perspective. And as we saw before, right, very similar architecture for disaster recovery as a service, right? Agent, is down there on the system in a virtual environment. You have in VMware, you have the OVA file, the virtual appliance that runs, right? On Hyper-V, you have instead the agent that gets installed on the host, right, but not on the virtual machines, right? We can grab those. We're talking about server images at this point. Wouldn't be disaster recovery if we're doing files and folders, right? So grabbing whole entire images of systems. We're going to then securely transfer that data over to the Arcserve cloud. You're going to log in and manage that through the portal, right? You can still do file and folder level restores. You're not limited to full restores. You can still do file and folder level restores. We're going to have the ability to fail over that system in under 5 minutes in most cases, okay, and bring up that system and then give you the ability to remotely connect to it, right, through VPNs, through point-to-site or site-to-site VPNs. So very straightforward from that perspective. So that wraps it up for when I look at, the presentation side of things. I do see quite a few questions that have come through out there, so we'll take some time and address those. But, I do want to also, before we wrap it up completely and go to the questions, if you've not taken a look at Arcserve solutions out there, I urge you, you can go out to arcserve.com, download the trials. I'm available on Spiceworks to answer your questions, if you have any, to help you out as well. So, put me to work, make me answer some questions out there.
All right. Well, thanks, Stacy. Hopefully we have a bit of time to where we can put you to work now. So I do want to remind everyone, if you have a question today, please go ahead and get that into Q&A. If we don't have time today, Stacy and team will be able to follow up with you post-event. Well, cool. All right. Well, first one coming in here is from Biscuit King. And Biscuit King is saying that his problem with DR is that there's all this talk about this person doing this and this person doing that. But what happens when those people have a real disaster and they're dealing with issues at their home and with their family? Can they really be expected to drop all of their personal obligations and, get their business back up and running?
Well, man, that's a great question, right? So we always think of disaster recovery as after the disaster. And what we're really proposing with a lot of these solutions is, pre-plan so that, as the disaster is coming, you can go ahead and fill over to these other locations. You could evacuate. You could do whatever you have to do, take care of your family, take care of all of that, okay? And log in quickly, fill over in those cases so that everything's going to be secure. It's going to be running in another location. And you don't necessarily need to or be asked to, hey, come in, we need you to do this, right? So the ability to quickly, easily fail over and fail back is going to be key for that, right? So I gave the example of a person in South Florida that they were trying to they were needing to evacuate and they're trying to fail over their system. So they're working with, support and everything like that. What do we need to do and all this other stuff. And really, it's a matter of going in and just being prepared and testing, and then once you're ready to go, push that button and fell over to that other location.
Great. And I think playing off of that question, we'll move into this question. How easy is it to recover one of your failovers with one of the Arcserve solutions?
No, fantastic question. When we look at the different solutions, something like Cloud Direct, right? We're going to, once that system is back online, we can reverse replicate the changes back down. Now, if the whole entire system's down, you need to rebuild it, well, then you're going to pull down an image. You're going to kind of re-image that system. And then, changes have still occurred during that process. So then you'll start that reverse replication, after that point in time. Okay. With something like high availability, it's meant to do failover and failback, right? It can leverage, snapshots and things like that you can re-snapshot a system with, and still, at the end of the day, reverse replicate your changes back over too. Same thing with UDP. So all of those solutions, are made to kind of support, ease of use, and let's get the data back over to that other location, to the primary location once the disaster is over. And it may not be the same location. It could be a different location.
Yeah, and this one is from Angie about UDP. She's asking, can I increase the storage capacity when required?
So when we look at, a software kind of rollout of our products, we're hardware agnostic, so absolutely. When you look at something like our appliances, all of our appliances are meant to be expandable, so you can, increase the amount of storage that you have in there to be able to do that as well. And then when you look at the Arcserve Cloud, of course, we love people to buy more and more, so no problem with that. So kind of, Angie, it kind of depends on, on the solution that we're looking at and how you're going to do it, but all of them are made to be able to expand and not limit you from that perspective. We don't expect people to buy all new appliances just because they're data group. Now, there will be points where, okay, we can only expand this appliance so much, right? Maybe we expand it by cloud, maybe we put more disk in it, and maybe we even go to the other expectation of let's put another appliance in and have multiple appliances that we manage through one console. So multiple ways that we could do that.
Awesome. And as we start to wrap out questions here, this last one, does Arcserve support other cloud offerings like AWS and Azure, besides Arcserve's own cloud?
Right, so we speak a lot about Arcserve Cloud and the capabilities that go to it. We realize that not everybody, number one, is going to be comfortable going to, a vendor kind of cloud as far as that goes, or they may be standardized on AWS or Azure. We've definitely ran into a lot of those cases. So we do, right? With all of our products, not only can we go to our own cloud, but then we can also go to that cloud. With the Arcserve Cloud, you're not really paying for the compute, okay, for the actual backup server that's running in the cloud. You go with something like Azure or AWS, and you put one of our backup servers in the cloud, so they could still be deduplicated and you could perform some of those functions, then you would have to have that additional cost when you speak to them about having compute. Now, we definitely would work with you on how do you build that server out and all of that in order to do that, okay? So we do support AWS and Azure. We're partners with AWS and Microsoft. We have plenty of customers that are in those environments too. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Stacy, for answering some of those Q&A questions there. If y'all did have additional questions for Stacy, please feel free to reach out to him in the Spiceworks community. He is a green guy for Arcserve in there, so please go bug him. He will definitely answer y'all's questions. So with that, Stacy, do you have some final words to leave today's audience with?
I kind of leave every one of my presentations like this for you guys. I hope you take it to heart. And that is, never trust a backup, never trust a DR plan, right? Always test, verify. Always, look and keep on top of, what's the new technology out there, from that perspective, because any plan in place is only as good as the people that are executing it and, also, having it tested frequently as well. So thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Stacy, so much for today's presentation. Also want to thank Arcserve for partnering and sponsoring today's webinar. I did want to remind everyone that you will be receiving an email in about 24 hours with a link to view this content again, so please feel free to check that out if you wish. And I also did want to remind everyone one last time to go check out Stacy's profile in the Spiceworks community, say hello to him there, and answer or ask him any questions that you may have. And with that, I did drop the prize winner of today's prize in chat, so congrats there. And with that, I did want to wish everyone a great afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you might be today. And we hope to see you back again on another Spiceworks partner webinar very soon. But until then, stay spicy, and thanks, everyone.